So yes, thanks for joining us. I'm sure I've probably seen a few of you on LinkedIn, but if you'd like to connect with me later, I'll be sending this PowerPoint to everybody. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. But assured, if you message any of the Concordia alumni pages, it will be myself who responds. And so as part of the Concordia alumni pages, we're kind of like the main source that pushes out a lot of the Shuffle stories, a lot of the Shuffle content, the sponsorship posts, and different milestones that are reached. And so if you ever are looking for inspiration or more info, you can also check out any of our accounts as well. For this shuffle, it's a very special shuffle as it is the 50th anniversary shuffle, which will mark just about $3 million that will be raised since the beginning of the shuffle, which is a great way to add kind of some extra, I like to say like sprinkle or sparkle to any of your shuffle posts. And so we've seen naturally since the launch in June that anything that has kind of hashtag Concordia 50 or marking Concordia's 50th performs really well on social media as well. And so if there's ways to incorporate that it's the 50th and that we're reaching this big milestone, it usually performs really well on social media. This will also apply to day of content. So on the day of, there'll also be 50th branded t-shirts. And so it's a great way to bring the 50th into the content that's already being made, which raises awareness not only for Concordia's 50th, but also philanthropy and the shuffle and how successful it's been since the start. Why post on social media? And so with fundraising, social media is quite a powerful tool, but I think it's really also a complement. And so I think as we were speaking earlier on in this meeting, personal emails, phone calls, text messages are one of the best ways to get donations as they're usually reaching our personal community, our closest community. But social media has a really big reach and wider impact. And so it's really great for reaching those, friends we don't talk to all the time, but we're still close with, colleagues, peers. So just a little bit of outside of our immediate circle who may not, not be in conversation with every single week. And so that's kind of our key demographic for who might also donate. And then a little further than that community is, just raising awareness about the Shuffle and Concordia's efforts. And as well as just your just promoting a culture of philanthropy and how you're being a part of that. And so social media is great for those two. And just to give an example, this is the amount of alumni. These numbers are also from previous years, so they've only grown, and so that are on these platforms. And so it's a great way to reach folks that you may not usually have access to, because a friend of yours can share, and then their friends share it, and that's how we create this larger web of engagement and interest. To get started, so I wasn't sure what levels we are all at in terms of content creation. So I'm starting off with some kind of general beginner stuff. And so there's like 5 key parts to a good social media post, I would say. A strong caption, which we'll go through some examples shortly, but the who, what, where, when, how. And so, who, so, I'm raising money for what, the shuffle that is occurring, end of September by this date. So they know there's a date they have to donate by. That's at Concordia. And, through shuffling, I'm raising money for so-and-so. And so just the kind of general information, which can honestly be summed up in one sentence, depending on the platform, sometimes shorter is best, but on other platforms, as we'll see, you can really take the time to kind of deep dive into each of those. Also on captions, I would say a lot of, especially on mobile, a lot of platforms, you really only see the first sentence. And so it's really important that your first sentence is really the most compelling, attention grabbing, that readers want to go right to it. So sometimes I find it's helpful if I write like my few keywords and I try to fit them all in my main caption. Often it's like my most important tag or my most important hashtag, because hashtags are also bolded. So even if it's not a trending hashtag, sometimes I will hashtag a word. Like today we were promoting the football tailgate for homecoming, for example, and I hashtagged football. Knowing that not everyone who's interested in football will be interested in Concordia's tailgate, but it bolds that word. So anyone who is part of the Concordia community who sees that will immediately see that it's related to football, the post. And so some tips and tricks on how to get your first sentence to really pop. As for fundraising goals, there can be pros and cons to putting your whole entire amount that you're trying to raise. And so I think it's up to your discretion. If you are hitting a big milestone, I think it's great to celebrate the amount, but sometimes also just what you're fundraising money to. And so we'll see a little later on, sometimes people post, I'm trying to reach 500 by this date. And there's some concrete commitments. Or you can also say, we're raising money for this cause. Any donation counts. And so there's different ways to go about the fundraising goal, which will have different impacts. For a call to action. And so I would say one of the most important things, especially when it comes to a post that's encouraging folks to either donate or share the post and spread the word, is that you need a very good and clear call to action. This can be, as we'll see on different platforms, it looks differently, but a very clear link towards your donation page, learn more. If that's the purpose of the post, is to raise engagement and awareness, then a link that goes towards maybe your Shuffle page that has more information about you. And so sometimes it's not the most obvious option, which would be your donation page. Sometimes it is a post that's really just raising awareness and you want to link to a story. If it's for more engagement, maybe it's just a photo and a caption. But if you're really trying to push donations, then I would highly recommend having your donation link as your call to action. For your hashtags. And so we have our 3 main hashtags that we've been using for Concordia Shuffle stuff, which is the CU Shuffle, Concordia 50 for this year, and CU Alumni for the alumni counts. But if you're also an alumni or appealing to that audience, I'd also recommend to use that hashtag. You can also use hashtags according to the platform. So, sometimes hashtag philanthropy will do really well, hashtag giving. And so depending on what content is in your caption, it also can make sense to do other hashtags if you're hoping to bring it to like the general population. So if it's more of an awareness raising post, sometimes it's great to just do hashtag Concordia University, hashtag Montreal, hashtag Quebec, because you're not hoping to really have a very specific community, whereas these are very specific to our community. A larger general hashtag will bring your post to a larger population and demographic. And what maybe one of the most important, since a lot of our platforms are geared towards visual content, I'd say other than Twitter really, is a strong photo. So a photo that brings lots of emotion, that gives context to your post, that's obviously relevant to your post. Usually I would say, high resolution and properly shot and all these things, but we're really noticing lately on social media that doesn't have to be perfectly curated. Sometimes things that look like they came out of your grandmother's basement do better. And I think that's because we're in an era where people really want to relate to content and really want, we're a little kind of post-influencer era where people still like very curated stuff, but especially for something that's raising money for students, I think you can also get away with much more familiar and not as professional photos. And so if you've been hesitating to post that photo because you weren't sure if it was going to be, up to par for LinkedIn, I think there's a little bit more flexibility, and depending on the platform too, there's a lot more flexibility. So for some examples, we're going to jump into each platform. LinkedIn is a great option, especially for philanthropy. It's a great platform because a lot of young professionals are on it, or just professionals in general. And so people often are there for job searching, yes, but really connecting and networking and relationship building in a much more, I would say, oh, I see a chat. Fire alarm, have to head out. Okay, Mary, no worries. It will be recorded, so I will keep going, but thanks for letting us know. And so for LinkedIn, you can take a little more time to do a little bit of a longer caption. So for example, if you're announcing a big milestone that you hit, then I would say LinkedIn is a great opportunity to write a little bit of a longer caption, because people often take more time to read through. And as you can see, as this example, there really is like an opening, a closing, usually the call to actions near the bottom, and then tagging multiple people. LinkedIn looks good with a few tags. I would say like this is a good amount. Other platforms like, Instagram, you can tag without them all being visible in the caption. And so you can get away with a little bit more. But I think this is a good example of a strong, caption with the who, what, where, when, how. A great photo, for example, I've taken this photo actually at another Black alumni event. So sometimes it's not often a photo that's even Concordia Shuffle specifically related. If it's about yourself and the fundraising efforts you've done, a photo of yourself can suffice. And so another example for LinkedIn that I thought was really good was also Rashida's, who did multiple photos. If you have multiple, even from past years, you can recycle content. But kind of a strong beginner sentence, LinkedIn community, I'll be walking the Concordia University Shuffle, tagging Concordia University in the main first sentence, and then your support. And so it's very clear what this post is about. So I thought it was a great example for a first line. LinkedIn's a little more generous in the thumbnail. So when people are scrolling, I think they see about 2 lines, but still important that your first line is really strong. And you can see like good use of emojis, but not as much on LinkedIn. But your own personality will shine through. And what's also great about LinkedIn is that it automatically shortens links for you. So as you can see, they have multiple links in their caption. I think this is fine. We often do 2 or 3 sometimes in a caption, depending. If it's pointing different things, like here's my page about me, and here's a link to donate and support. Because how it shortens the links, it looks still quite clear and good in a caption. And hashtags do well on LinkedIn. I wouldn't say they're as strong as a driver as on other platforms, but they're being more and more used. And so as you can see, Rashida hashtagged a lot of the internal hashtags that we use, which are great because I often, check those out on a kind of weekly basis. And so if you use those, I will often see it. Or if you tag, Concordia University or Concordia alumni, for example, I reshared this one on our main page. So it's a great way if you do, a big shuffle post that you're proud of, I will see it on the Concordia alumni accounts and can reshare it on ours. For Instagram, this is a very fun post with a pet in a shuffle shirt. And so Instagram, much more short and sweet, but it's a great opportunity to do things in the stories where you can have links. I would say you don't have to spend as much time crafting a whole long caption. And so, but also really strong on on the hashtags. And so I thought this was a good example. It still has the who, what, where, when, how, but in a little shorter context. Emojis are great for breaking up the text since Instagram often kind of puts things all together. And then your hashtags. And so Instagram, I think, is really fun, especially if you're planning on shuffling the day of, making sure to get some content, putting it in your stories. And later on, I'll share how we have, some cool gifts and stickers if you like to do stories on Instagram or Facebook. So please let me know if I'm speaking too quickly. If you have other questions, I'll go through some general tips and tricks in a second, but I thought it'd be good to break down platforms because sometimes I'm sure we're all on different platforms and deciding on which platform to use to reach which audience is a whole other question. And so we can deep dive into that a little bit after breaking down each platform. So for Facebook, 2 examples, we have Katie, Concordia staff as well, and Rosemary here. It's an example of a photo post versus a link post. And so I would say if you can, I'd always go with a photo post versus just a link thumbnail or preview, especially being careful with the previews because often they're not properly placed or they default to general Concordia ones sometimes if the social media thumbnail hasn't been set. And so you want to make sure that it's a very strong photo, regardless if it's the thumbnail. That being said, what's really great about thumbnails, though, is that they often have the title of whatever the article is posting to, and the title is often what people first see when they're scrolling. And so it does have that added benefit that, if it's a strong photo still in the thumbnail and a strong article caption or title, then the posts do really, really well. And so, yeah, I would say Facebook, you can also, depending on how long or short you want to write, I think if you're active on Facebook, you would know how much your community tends to read posts and what people are posting like. And so I think there's more flexibility with that. Facebook, if you're not posting a link, a thumbnail, and you're just preview and you're just going with the photo option, you can also just use any kind of link shortener online. We use Bitly, but if you don't want to have a big, long link in your post, then if you just look up a link shortener, then they can shorten it. And often, as you'll see in Katie's post, there's what's called like a vanity URL. And so it's a shorter URL that Concordia has that will actually link to the full URL. And so sometimes, yes, the best way is just copy paste the URL when you go to the web page. But often, and you can ask me if any questions by email if you're looking for one. But for example, Concordia/shuffle, there's also Concordia/ca/Concordia50. For the 50th page. And so these vanity URLs are great for platforms that don't automatically shorten your links. That way they don't take up your whole caption, especially on things like Twitter where you have a word count that you need to stick to. And speaking of Twitter, I should say X, some great options for Twitter. Twitter is an interesting one because, these are both very personal posts and they have a few reshares, but I think you have to be consciously thinking of, is your goal to have people just like it and engage with it and click on it, or to reshare it? And so if it's more personal, maybe there'll be less reshares because, it's just like, here's me and my son. But then you can get maybe higher engagement and clicks on your link versus if you create something that's more maybe general about the shuffle and maybe the amount that you've raised, people will share it and celebrate it. And so being conscious of how you write your caption will alter how people engage with the content. But I think these were both great examples. As you can see, they tagged Concordia, CU Shuffle, which I don't believe is active on Twitter anymore, and Concordia alumni. And so please do tag us and we will reshare it on Twitter. You can be much more active on Twitter. So like multiple posts can go out a day. Usually we like to stick to, one or two per platform when it's like Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn, whereas Twitter is much more forgiving in terms of doing a few more posts. Here's some general tips and tricks, which will almost wrap up kind of like the presentation portion before I want to like workshop some things and ask y'all some questions, or you can ask me some questions. And so some great tips and tricks, as we've seen kind of in these past few posts, are tagging fellow shufflers, so people who are part of your team. If you're shuffling by yourself, sometimes it can also just be like, we are, say later on, but like tagging, I'm raising money for, and then tag the unit or department that you're raising money for. And so often you need to be creative, thinking of like, who can you tag and who are you trying to bring this information to? Because tags are like one of your primary ways to get it to the community you want it to reach. So often when we're doing a gift announcement or a milestone, it's very important that we're tagging, the business, the CEO, whoever's kind of related to it. And so that brings it straight to their community because they'll often reshare it. And then that's when you get all that high engagement, because people who are commenting and will really have like boost engagement are people who are the closest, who are impacted by the post, right? And when they engage with it, then it'll broaden the reach and your post will just do better in engagement in general because it'll have that reach because the algorithm likes that people are interacting with it. That can also go with like the time of day that you're posting. You want to post at a time that the community that you're trying to reach is online and active, because that first kind of hour window is usually what kind of sets where the algorithm will think if people are liking your post or not. And so I don't recommend, a 2 a.m. post. Sometimes they do well, people, there's not as much content going out, and in the mornings, the first thing people see. So you can play around with it, but usually I would say stick to your peak times. You also, on Facebook groups, for example, you can share it in the different community groups, LinkedIn as well. For example, Concordia Alumni has a community group. And so often if you're raising for a certain department, they'll have a group as well on Facebook or other platforms. And so if it's relevant to your post, you can share it in different groups. As I mentioned, tagging who you're fundraising for, make sure your images and thumbnails are clear and interesting. Same thing for tagging for stories. Stories on Instagram you can have lots of fun with as well. So I'll share a little bit after the webpage, which I think I shared last week, but that has, all the Concordia GIFs and stickers that you can use. And also really important that when you're posting to engage with folks in the comments. And so, as I said, there's kind of that window. It's really important that you engage with folks. If they comment something, you can comment back, you can like it. The algorithms will say, okay, this person's online and active and there's a conversation going. And so it'll also just boost the reach in general. And also, I think, especially if you're asking people to donate, it's nice to show that you're like actively engaging with folks and not just like, here's a link and there you go. As I mentioned, the importance of the first sentence being eye-catching and the gifts and stickers. And as I mentioned many times, I think tagging Concordia alumni, it's a great way. I also just keep track of posts that go out and our kind of top shuffle posters and stuff. And so it's a great way for me to keep an eye on what content is going out and what's doing well. And so, yes, I'll show you the webpage in a second, but here's some of the Concordia gifts. It's a great way to 50ify some of the stuff. There's also some more content from the concordia.ca/50 webpage that you can also download if you'd like to 50ify any of the content you're trying to do or post. And that is it for the presentation section. I'll quickly share just for those who weren't there with me last week. So there is on the main shuffle page. If you go to fundraising and you go to branding kit, you'll see actually some more options for captions and best practices. You'll find the shareable images, which will bring you to our Flickr page, which you just have to look up shuffle, and you'll have a bunch of photos from past years that you can use, as well as just the training for today. And so, but there's also lots of information that you can pull if you're looking for information to pull from your for your caption as well as the story. There was a story posted about 2 weeks ago. And so if you just look up in the Concordia news section, shuffle, sometimes it has some cool stats that you can add. Often we'll start ours with like, did you know we've raised this much money since the start? Did you know it's the 50th anniversary shuffle? Did you know we'll reach $3 million a shuffle in donations? And so you can also pull from the alumni news stories that come out.